So Prime Minister Trudeau is off to Washington, D.C. this week to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, the North American and European alliance that was set up to stabilize the West against the Soviet Union following the Second World War. It's a very worthwhile organization to be involved with even now. If you look at Russia's attack on Ukraine, you can understand why we in the Western countries have to have an alliance to keep us safe from Russian aggression. But Trudeau in Washington, D.C. must be about as welcome as a flatulent passenger on an elevator. The alliance has been telling Canada now for the last couple of years that we really have to increase our defense spending. The NATO target for countries is 2% of their GDP on defense spending. We spend about 1.2 or 1.3%. Now, in the last 6 months or so, Bill Blair, the defense minister, has been saying, oh, no, we're going to spend a lot more than that. We're going to get up to that NATO target of 2%. But the Parliamentary Budget Office this week said, no, if you're lucky, you're going to get to about 1.5% in a couple of years from now. And then, given the projections that were in the budget back in April, you're going to fall back to about 1.4%. Now, Trudeau's responded this week in a speech in Washington, D.C. by saying, yes, but Canada's contribution is very important. We are leaders in climate change. Yes, that's going to defend us against the Russians. The fact that we have an electric vehicle mandate so that there will be no more internal combustion engines in Canada by 2035. Yeah, that's how we're going to defend the Western democracies against Russian aggression, is by having a net zero power grid by 2030. It's ridiculous, but it shows just how obsessed the Liberal government is with climate change and not any of the other major priorities a government normally has to think about, like national security. This is a group that doesn't care whether the Chinese are interfering in our elections. It doesn't care whether Chinese military are sending spies to Canada to look at our military training. It doesn't care that we aren't spending anywhere near the NATO requirement for member countries because we're doing everything right on climate change. They're a broken record on climate change. Now, what are we going to do? The Russians are going to invade another country in Europe. They've invaded Ukraine, which of course is not yet a NATO member. But what if they invade Poland, which is a NATO member, right next to Ukraine? What are we going to do? We're going to send over some bureaucrats from Environment and Climate Change Canada to test to see whether Russian tanks have the proper emissions. We're going to make sure that the missiles that they're firing into children's hospitals don't emit harmful chemicals into the environment. Trudeau just makes us look silly, and he himself looks silly. That's why I thought it was so important last week when the early excerpts from Marc Garneau, the astronaut turned Liberal cabinet minister, his book excerpts came out last weekend, and Garneau said, we've fallen in esteem around the world since Trudeau became prime minister, because he makes grand pronouncements, but he never follows through. And that's what he's doing in NATO. He's making grand pronouncements about how we're going to get to the 2% mark, but he's going to include climate change spending in that total. We're not going to buy new tanks. We're not going to buy new planes. We're not going to buy enough new planes. We're not going to buy enough new ships. We're not going to recruit enough new soldiers and airmen and sailors. We're just going to be a laughingstock, a sovereign nation that relies on other countries to defend our democracy. It really is appalling when you think of it. For Post Media, I'm Lorne Gunter.